we're starting with d4, and you said, well, I like to play the London system, and I go like, oh, well, let's get out a little bit of the comfort zone here and let's play c5, right? So that you cannot just simply play bishop f4 and all of these things so quickly, and so that you have to think a little bit more of the position, right? But I like the fact that you play d3, which is more or less a standard move here, and which is a move that I like to play against c5, or that I like to play against c5 if I am a London system player. I think it's one of the most solid ways to proceed. Also, in this kind of positions, you can try to change the way to proceed with bishop f4, and maybe play something like a collie system with bishop d3 eventually, maybe knight f3, castle, rook e1, and then finally try to break on e4. I think it's something that's healthy and nobody dies because of that. Just another idea, just in case if you get into this position and you cannot get your bishop out, could be something that you can apply in your games. So, e6, knight f3, pawn takes, knight f6, c3, bishop e7, all of these moves make sense. I guess in this position I wouldn't play c3, I would try to go for c4, you know, and play a little bit more actively. The reason why I say that is because c3 seems a little bit more like passive, defending the pawn on d4, even though nobody's attacking it yet, right? So maybe waiting instead of playing c3 a little bit and playing something like bishop d3, castle, c4, and knight c3 gives you also the square c3, which is good for your knight, and you have the chance to develop your pieces in a more natural way and fight a little bit more for the center. If you play c3 in this position, it's a little bit more like passive if you think about it. It's playable. I don't have anything against that. It's solid. But nonetheless, I guess that c4 is the move that I'd like to play a little bit more in these kind of positions, right? So you can have more space. So you played c3. Okay. Bishop e7, bishop d3, d6. And here you said, well, I don't know why d6. What's the idea behind this d6, which is kind of weird, right? You would expect moves like d5 in this position. But nonetheless, I thought that this could be played as a Sicilian. And the reason why I play d6 is because I don't want you to get into e5, which is also one of the main ideas of the London system with your bishop on f4. Sometimes you want to get your knight on e5 due to the fact that there is no pawn on d6, which is defending the square e5, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So the idea with d6 is, even though to a certain extent, yeah, I'm not going for the center and not controlling these squares, you didn't go for the center either. Like, you played c3, so I thought, alright, if you're not gonna play c4, then I'm gonna play d6, and the idea is that now I'm defending the square e5. Also, I'm giving some chances to my pieces to go out, and maybe I'd like to bring to break in the center with e5 soon, right? Could be one of the ideas that I had in mind. Here I wanted to castle, probably to play something like, even a plan like bishop d7, bishop c6 was in my mind, like something like this, and then play knight d7, for example, so that my bishop gets a decent position. I do not debilitate my position with moves like b6, generating weaknesses in the white squares, but I could simply play something like this and then get my pieces out, and finally try to break in this fashion, or just simply play rook c8 and play a more Sicilian-ish way of this position, if that makes sense. So, here you castle, which is a move that I like. I castled, bishop f4. So, alright, here in this position you have to decide what you want to do, right? You need to generate a plan here. Because I see that till this position you were playing pretty much what you wanted to play, which is more or less something that you'll see a lot in the London system, the Collie system. You're playing c3, you're playing d4, you're playing knight f3, you're castling, your bishop goes to d3. You only need to generate an attack on the king side and kill me, and then you have accomplished all you wanted, right? But nonetheless, here you need to figure out what you want to do with every single one of your pieces, and where are you heading, right? Like, for example, in this position here, you play bishop f4 because you wanted to develop, but nonetheless you didn't have a clear objective here, like what you want to do in this position. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I really couldn't formulate a plan. I don't really know how to do that.
I mean, generally what we try to do when we're trying to generate a plan, and I'll probably send you a couple of links so that you get a better sense of what I'm talking about, is basically we try to evaluate. Do you know what evaluating means in chess?
No.
Well, basically what you want to do is you sit down there and you start to see every single one of the pieces and every single one of the pawns of yours, of course, and of your adversary as well. So what you want to do is basically you say, well, let's see what's the problem that I am facing, and let's see how can I solve it, and what's the ideal situation in which all my problems are solved, and then you try to go to that ideal situation, right? That's a strategy, basically. So in this position, something that you try to do is basically, you'll sit down here and you'll say, well, in this position, my king is already safe, my rook is on f1, that means that, well, probably this rook is coming to e1, where it will have a little bit more space to work with. Also, this bishop on c1 is a problem, this knight on b1 is a problem, this rook on a1 is a problem, because none of them have developed yet, right? Also, probably in this position, I'd like to play moves like c4 in the future, so that I get more control of the center with my central pawns. That could be nice. I probably like to develop this bishop either to g5, or maybe to f4, or even maybe to e3. It all depends on your plan. The thing is that bishop e3 does not seem so nice. It seems a little bit obstructed by its own pawns, so that could be an idea. But nonetheless, bishop g5, let's say, is one of the ideas that could complement your plan. Maybe c4 followed by knight c3. See the importance of playing c4 before. Your knight has a more natural square to go to. So maybe c4, knight c3, rook c1, queen d2 with a bishop on g5, of course, rook d1, and then I can try to throw an attack on the queen side even with moves to like c5, d5, or b4, and then generate pressure there. Could be an option, right? The reason why I say that is because you have the majority in the queen side in terms of the pawn structure, right? See how you have 4 pawns here, I have 3 pawns on the queen side, so you might as well try to generate weaknesses on the queen side, not only being focused on how to kill me on the king side, due to the fact that I have a decent position there, and I have a knight on f6, which is defending, and it doesn't seem so likely that you're going to generate an attack here, which is going to kill me. I will try to go a little bit more for the strategic way of playing simply c4, knight c3, bishop g5, queen c2, maybe rook c1, maybe eventually rook e1 or rook d1, and then push b4 and generate an attack on the queen side. See how I'm just solving the problems that I have in my position with the white pieces, and then I'm trying to generate problems in the position of the other guy. How come? Because after I push my pawns on the queen side, I will be generating an attack, and I will be forcing him to react to my position. Does that make sense?
It just makes sense, yeah.
So that's basically generating a plan, right? That's how we try to figure out what to do, because whenever we do not know what to do, we should probably evaluate and see what's going on, right? On the other hand, what's the evaluation for the black pieces here? The evaluation for the black pieces will be, well, I just castle so that my king is safe, to a certain extent, of course. You have to be careful with these bishop stakes, h7, which are always in mind in these kind of situations. But nonetheless, well, my king is safe. I have a knight on f6, that means that it is developed, my bishop on e7 is developed. I have the same problem that you have, my queen side is undeveloped, I have to do something about it. My bishop on c8 cannot go out due to the fact that I have a pawn on e6, which is restraining my mobility, and that means that this bishop cannot go in the general, or in the ideal way of simply moving the bishop to g5, or to, to g4, to f5, it could be nice. Also, whoops. My knight, well, I have to decide where do I want to move my knight. I have a couple of options. One of them is knight c6, the other one is knight e7, right? If I go to c6, that seems to be the most natural square to go to with my knight. If I go to d7, I'm also blockading the bishop and its mobility, so that might not be so nice. If I want to develop my bishop, maybe the way to proceed would be something like b6, bishop b7. Nonetheless, at the same time, I'm moving my pawns to dark squares. That means that my white squares will be a little bit weakened, and that's something that I don't like so much. And my rook probably is coming to c8, so I have to decide whether I want to play something like bishop d7, bishop c6, and try to get my bishop into this diagonal in that fashion, followed by probably knight d7, so that my knight is not obstructing my bishop, and then probably try to break with a move like e5. Another way to proceed would be rook e8, bishop f8, knight c6, and then try to break in e5, for example. So you see how I'm generating plans out of the position that I have, but not out of nowhere, right? But out of the problems that I have, and how to solve them in a way that every single one of my pieces is included in the plan, basically. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah.
So, here you play bishop f4. But nonetheless, if you're going to play bishop f4, and then a couple of moves later you're going to play bishop g5, this is not congruent, you know?
Yeah.
You're losing a tempo here. You're playing bishop f4, and then suddenly you play bishop g5. And see how, after I play h6, you go backwards, play e5, and then suddenly you take on f6. I mean, you're playing bishop f4, bishop g5, bishop h4, bishop g, and finally bishop takes f6, right? So that's
Yeah.
too many tempi. Like, it's not what you want to do in this kind of positions. Because if you do that, then what you're basically doing is trading this piece, which has moved once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, for a knight that just moved once. You see what you're doing, right?
Sense.
So,
Yeah.
basically you're helping me. And you do not want to help me. Because you're my adversary here, you're my opponent, you want to kill me. So, in this sense, if you want to move your bishop to g5, for example, and if that's part of your plan, and that's what you want to do, because you consider that bishop g5 is the best square to go to, then do it in one tempo. And if you want to trade the bishop for the knight, do it in one tempo. I wouldn't recommend you to trade the bishop for the knight necessarily, because I think that, well, you're giving away the pair of bishops in a position which is open. So that's not necessarily something that I like to do either. So, but if you want to do that, I mean, do it in a more efficient way, right? Like bishop g5, bishop takes f6. So do not go about it like this, and then do this, and then all of these things. Not necessarily the best way. That's telling me that you're lacking a little bit of evaluation and a little bit of planning. Because if you plan here, another way to proceed would have been simply to play c4. You see how you're not so... I'm not giving moves which are so stuck with the original plan, which was simply to play more or less a London system with bishop f4, bring my pieces out, and eventually generate an attack on the king side. I'm also thinking about the other circumstances of the board, and how can I take advantage of that. So, probably a move that I'd play, even if it requires me to lose a tempo, would be c4, with the idea of playing simply knight c3, and see how all my pieces go out in a more harmonious way, if you think about it. Like, they are not getting in the way of each other, like for example if I move my knight to d2 or things like that, and everything seems to be a little bit more natural. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So bishop f4, it's alright, it's a nice idea, but nonetheless, if you are gonna play bishop g5 afterwards and then bishop h4 and bishop takes f6, dubious, you know. So knight c6, see how I'm not doing anything crazy? Just as you haven't done anything crazy yet, you have just finished your development. Probably just the only move that I don't like to this point is c3, because I think it's a little bit passive, but nonetheless, other than that, everything seems to be working alright. So, knight bd2 makes sense, rook e8 makes sense due to the plan that I told you before, maybe pushing something like this, bringing my rook towards the center. It's just a normal move. Bishop g5, here things start to look a little bit weird. I go like, alright, you said that you wanted to get rid of the knight on f6 because you want to generate an attack, right? I like that. Nonetheless, you have to see how can you get rid of the knight. Because the knight is a natural defender of the castle, basically. So this knight here is defending the castle and it's doing a really nice job. If you want to get rid of the knight, you have to consider how can you get rid of the knight, right? Then you go and you say, well, I have a couple of options. One of the options involves moving my bishop from f4 to g5. If I do that, then the problem that I have is that, well, I'm giving away the pair of bishops, it is an open position. Also, if I trade this bishop for this knight, I'm helping him because I'm basically moving this bishop to f6, where it can go to where it can push moves like e5, breaking the position, which is what he wants to do. Something quite typical of positions like Sicilians or Najdorf, where you want to play e5 and break the position, something that I wanted to do. On the other hand, you have another move to try to get rid of the knight on f6. What is it?
Is it knight e4?
Exactly, knight e4. And knight e4 seems to have a little bit more of pros than bishop g5. Because if you move your knight to e4, you're keeping your bishop, you're trading this knight for this other knight. What's happening here is that you're keeping pressure on h7. You are not helping me, giving me a tempo with h6, which is basically getting rid of the weakness that you could try to take advantage of, which is h7. Also, the position seems to make sense. Your rook is going to e1, your rook is going to probably c1, your queen can still go to c2. And I have no argument against knight e4, I guess. Maybe it's just moving the same piece twice, but it makes sense. I mean, it's not the end of the world. So, knight e4 seems to make way more sense than bishop g5, for example, if you want to get rid of the knight on f6, which is not necessarily what you want to do. For example, you could also simply try to push c4 one more time, so that you get more control of the center. You could try to push moves like even b4, so that you're pushing moves like b5, getting rid of this knight, and forcing me to go backwards, for example. Could be an idea. I'm not saying that these ideas are the best ideas, just ideas that are coming to my mind, right? So,
gotcha.
Bishop g5, dubious, right? You played h6. Here I played h6, of course. You go backwards. e5. I'm just following my plan. See how, one more time. Also, something interesting is that as I move my pawn to e5, then my bishop has more mobility. And I can just simply get it out without so much trouble as I had before. So, you played bishop takes, which I don't know, I don't like that much. Nonetheless, well, in this position makes sense. Bishop takes, d5. The knight goes to e7. Now my pieces are a little bit like out of the game, if you think about it. Like everybody's a little bit sad because all of them are kind of in the back rows of the position, and everybody is just a little bit passive, right? And nonetheless, I thought that I had the option to basically in the future improve the position of my bishop, or my knight to f5, eventually bring my rook to c8, and even though I have a backward pawn on these hits, I thought that was something that I could deal with due to the fact that now I had some central control and I could try to do something about it, right? Maybe with f5 in the future as well, or just simply trading pieces and eventually trying to liberate my position. Could be something nice. So, in this position, you played c4, makes sense. Bishop f5, queen c2. And here, I'm not so sure about this queen c2. I don't know, this queen c2 here might be the move, but nonetheless, I was thinking about moves like this one, which could be a little bit more annoying. Because I'm threatening to take on f6, right? And if I do that, then this pawn structure is falling. It's something that I don't want to play with the black pieces, right? So,
yeah,
knight e4 seems a little bit better. Also, the most natural square for the knight seems to be e4, whereas the most natural square for the bishop seems to be d3, actually, you know? So when you play bishop e4 in the future, like when you consider bishop e4 in the future, for example, I don't think that's the best move. Probably knight e4. And also something that you have to consider here is what's your bishop doing on e4, which is not doing on d3. And what's your knight doing on e4, that's not doing on d2. Does that make sense?
it does make sense, yeah.
Like, for example, if you play here queen c2, I guess that also makes sense, but I just simply play queen d7, everything seems to be protected. Rook e1, rook c8, b3. Here you have to be careful because not only I have this move, which is totally, astonishingly disgusting, right? It's just too tricky. But also I have moves like knight takes d5, which you didn't consider, and I thought were important. Because basically your queen is pinned now. See how your queen is now on edge race, and that could be annoying. Also, of course in this position it's not gonna fly because bishop takes is just simply winning a piece. But nonetheless it's a move that you never consider and that I had in the future, even though I didn't play it. And I was expecting you to say something about the pawn on d5 and the pin that you had on your queen. So that's another thing that I had to tell you here. Be constantly thinking about the pins. Be constantly thinking about the edge race. Why? Because here, see how this b3 is a byproduct also of not evaluating a little bit. Because if you evaluate here, you'll see that the bishop on f6, even though it seems like it's doing nothing, it's generating edge race on the rook on a1. So that could be annoying in the future. If you see every single one of the pieces and you diagnose the problems that are happening on the board, you'll see that one of your problems is that this bishop, even though it seems like it's doing nothing, has edge race. This rook on c8 has a pin here, which could be annoying. This queen on c2, even though it seems like it has a natural square, might be under attack and under pressure in the future due to the fact that this rook could take advantage of it. This knight on e7, even though it seems passive and silly, could simply take on d5 in certain positions. So see all of those things that we are taking into consideration now, and that we have to be careful with. Also, another move that I was considering with the black pieces was b5. And you might be thinking, why is that move important? The reason why I was considering that move was because if you took here, then I would take here, right? And I mean, not in this position, of course, it's just like the general idea of it. I will be taking here, and I would be trading one of the side pawns for one of the central pawns, debilitating your center, and then I will have a really decent position. Also, if you played b3, for example, I could try to play something like pawn takes, and then suddenly what's happening here is that even though I have a backward pawn, you also have a backward pawn, and I have something to attack now. I have something to go for. Whereas in this position, I have nothing to attack in this situation. If I just manage to trade, let's say, this pawn for this pawn becomes a little bit weak, as there's no other pawn defending it, and I could try to take advantage of it. So those are some of my ideas. See how I'm constantly looking for the answers in the position. I'm not just thinking about the moves. I'm thinking about it like in a more holistic way, if you will, trying to see every single one of the aspects of the position and trying to incorporate it in my thought process. So something that I am seeing is that you're simply thinking about 2 or 3 of your pieces at any given point, but you're ignoring the rest of the position, right? Like you're ignoring the pawns, you're ignoring the rooks, you're ignoring the king's safety and things like that. It's not to say that you're suffering or something like that, or you're playing crown or whatever. It's just that you have to have a little bit more of awareness, right? This is something that you'll get a little bit more if you practice this a lot, like evaluating a lot, etc. Then and planning, of course. I'm gonna send you a link to that video that I created on it, so that you get a better sense of what I'm saying here. But nonetheless, if you incorporate these good habits here, eventually these are gonna be better for you, and these are gonna be more natural for you, and you'll be able to see every single one of the pieces and try to make moves according to the situation that you're facing. Also, something that I am seeing is that you're not thinking that much about the moves of the other guy. You seem to be too caught up in your own moves, you know? Like for example here, you weren't thinking about my pieces, you were thinking just about yours. Like when you play bishop here, bishop here, bishop here, you were thinking that, well, you wanted to get rid of the knight, but what about all of the other pieces? What about the moves that you invested with the bishop? What about the pair of bishops? What about how to stop me from playing moves like e5 so that this bishop is a little bit silly? What about getting the control of the center? What about what's the plan of the other guy and how can I stop it? So see all of these little nuances that you're forgetting a little bit, but I am thinking of, you know? So those are important to take into consideration. It's just to try to figure out what's going on and see it in a deeper sense. So, knight d2, rook e8, h6, bishop h4, d5, c4, knight... And here I guess just knight e4 is a move that I like. Not putting my queen into this pin here. Could be nice. Also, I have to be careful because, I mean, for what we just discussed of knight takes f6, so I guess just bishop takes was the move that I was gonna play. And nonetheless, in this position, this seems to be a pretty decent position for the white pieces, because see how these 2 pawns are in dark squares. This bishop is a dark squares bishop, and these 2 pawns are kind of restricted right now. That means that as I cannot advance this pawn, this bishop is silly. It cannot do anything. It's basically a pawn if you think about it, like, what can I do with this bishop? Whereas, even though this bishop is in white squares, and these 2 pawns are in white squares, these 2 pawns are mobile. And you can try to figure out a way to push these pawns up and to try to win with this a little advantage here, for example. Maybe something like rook e1, rook c1. See how this is just a strategy? But basically, if you keep me with my bad pieces and you keep your good pieces, eventually you just have an advantage, right? So here, how do we proceed? I think that this could have been a really nice way to proceed. I guess I could simply play something like queen d7, following the plan of playing b5 or something like that, to which you could answer with moves like a4 even, and just stop me from doing something like that. Or just queen d3, or something like that, and eventually your position is just going to be pretty decent. I believe that here, you cannot ask for a lot more than what you have. Now you have to try to start to generate a plan to take advantage of this pawn on these sits, and to take advantage of this bishop which is not working. So, see how we're transforming here this position to this one, right? Where you have way more chances than I do, for example, in this position. But it requires evaluation and to see what's going on the board, diagnose what pieces are the best pieces, what pieces are the worst pieces, and how can I keep my best pieces where you keep your bad pieces. And then you can accumulate some advantage. Also, your rooks are more free to go. My rooks are not so clear, like, alright, my rook goes to c8, but I don't see like a big plan to take advantage of the position. Maybe a6, b5 in the future as well, to try to take advantage of the pawn on d5, but it's not so clear, right? So, queen c2, not a move that I like so much. Queen d7, maybe here even one more time, this move, and I guess I have to take because I don't want to lose this bishop here. So, bishop takes, and not because of the bishop itself, you know, because the bishop, I don't care that much about the bishop, but because of the pawn structure. So if I could trade this bishop for this knight without getting this horrible pawn structure here, I'd do it. And the problem is that I cannot, so I have to trade. And if I trade one more time, we're in more or less the same position. I don't like that the queen is on c2, due to the fact that rook c8 is coming one more time, but still you have the advantage here, definitely. So, rook fe1, rook c8, just playing normal moves. If anything, I have a little bit of compensation, which would be the pair of bishops, but this pair of bishops is not reliable, because they are easily something that can get it out of the board soon, and which are not giving me any advantage for the moment. Nonetheless, when you played b3, this is basically ignoring the fact that I have moved like e4. Even though this bishop seems like it is dead, it still has some life within, you know, like it still has some tricky moves here in this diagonal. So, important for you to notice here that even though this bishop seems to be trapped and horrible, which it is, if you play something like b3, which is more or less what you played when you played c3, you know, something which seems a little bit passive for me, then what you're doing is that you're activating this bishop and you're giving some squares to it. So b3, even imagining that this move does not exist, is not a move that I will try to play in this position, because I think that's passive. I want to win on the queen side. Attacking on the king side does not seem to flourish, to work here in this position. So I think that probably simply simplifying with this move and getting into this position one more time, and then try to push b4 and play actively, you know. You can see that you're playing a little bit too passively. And if you push your pieces a little bit more in this position, for example, where you control the center, your pieces are better, your queen is not so well positioned, but it's something that you can solve, and you have a majority in the queen side, and you have this backward pawn, that's a recipe for a really good position for you. Nonetheless, if you do not take advantage of it, it evaporates, because that's advantage in chess. If you do not take advantage of something, unless your guy just keeps committing mistakes constantly, then it evaporates. So bishop takes, and that would be nice. So b3, e5, e5, e4, bishop takes e1, and now I'm a quality up, so I can't complain. I mean, it's a quality up. What do I want, right? So, and in this position you weren't thinking about this move. I thought about it, but I thought, well, that probably will be winning too easily, and I thought that maybe a little bit more instructive will be to see how do you react to knight g6, and what were you thinking about this position in that sense. So, also I have some tricks with queen f5, which are generating threats on the knight, and also a pin on the queen, which is hanging, and that might be annoying. So, played rook f1, which is a move that I didn't understand at the moment. You said that you wanted to play f4 and then push a pawn, but that seems too remote for me. I guess that's tricky to a certain extent, but I don't know, it's something that I don't like that much, because if you move your rook to f1, it is not so different from having the rook on a1. I mean, in this position, you have to pay the consequences of the mistakes that you committed with this b3, right? So, rook f1, knight e5, knight e2, you're not trading pieces, that's nice. Rook e7, f4, knight e4, rook f3, here. And well, this is just a blunder, but nonetheless, I like the fact that you didn't trade pieces and that you managed to try to keep a position where you still had some options, right? And that you're trying to play aggressively because you're down materially. That's something that I like. I like that you have that instinct, that force of trying to go for it. Also, another move that's happening here is queen takes d5, you know? So it's something to be concerned of, because after pawn takes and rook takes c2. See how you never gave a thought to this rook c8, and even though it seems silly, it has a lot of tricks with it, and it has a lot of nuances with it that you have to be careful with. So, knight g3, queen takes, and well, this is just over, right? There's no way for you to hold this position. And nonetheless, I thought this was a really interesting game, and I really like this one actually. I'm gonna upload this one to the YouTube channel, and I think it's gonna be really nice.